Welcome to Talk Treatises.
Thanks for having me back.
Today we're going to attempt a very specific kind of time travel on this deep dive.
Right, it's not just jumping back a few centuries.
Exactly. We aren't just going back to a different year, we are going back to a completely different mindset.
A different operating system for the human experience, honestly.
Yeah, an entirely different operating system. We are turning our analytical lens onto a classic work today. And if you just glance at the spine of this text in a dusty bookstore, it looks like a collection of quaint, pleasant historical anecdotes.
It really does look that way, just a nice soft read.
But appearances, as you're going to see today, are deceiving.
Very deceiving. We are digging into a text that functions as a rigorous tripartite study of the logic of romance.
The logic of romance. I really love that phrasing.
It stands out, doesn't it?
It does, because usually, we think of romance as the exact opposite of logic.
Right, we think of emotion.
Emotion, chaos,
Yeah.
Butterflies. But this text argues that romance actually has a structure.
A highly specific structure. And it's operating within the incredibly rigid constraints of Puritan and colonial New England history.
We're looking at a world of granite, iron, theology.
And our mission today for this deep dive is to analyze how this text deconstructs those rigid social architectures of the 17th and 18th centuries.
Let's see what's underneath all that.
Exactly. We want to see how human agency operates beneath the surface, specifically female agency.
Operating right beneath what we usually think of as a very stone-faced, austere history.
It's a bit of a rescue mission, really.
Rescuing these historical figures from their own mythology.
That is the central tension the text addresses right up front. The authors identify a conflict between what they call the demigods.
The pilgrims, the founders, figures like...
You're right, the austere figures like Miles Standish, a conflict between them and the human reality of their actual lives.
The demigods, that captures it so perfectly. It's the bumper sticker view of a pilgrim.
The joyless logic machine.
Yeah, the guy in a black hat with a buckle who hates fun, eats cold porridge, and just never, ever smiles.
Precisely. We've essentially turned our ancestors into statues.
Granite ledges.
And this text completely challenges that view. It posits that romance and passion and what we might call the illogical forces of affection.
They weren't antithetical to the Puritan worldview.
No, not at all. In fact, the argument here is that they were the necessary undercurrents that allowed survival.
Because you just cannot build a civilization on theology alone.
You cannot. Theology gives you the laws.
But it doesn't keep you warm at night.
Exactly. You need the chaotic force of human connection to actually survive the winter, to keep going.
So let's set the stage historically for everyone before we really get into the arguments here.
Yeah.
We are spanning a fairly significant timeline.
We are. The text moves chronologically, and it covers three very distinct eras of the American experiment.
Starting at the very beginning.
Right. We start with the Plymouth colony in the 1620s.
The starving time.
The brutal early days. Then we move forward to the mid-18th century. We split our time there between the rocky chaos of Marblehead and the ordered artifice of Boston.
A great contrast there.
A massive contrast. And finally, we end up in pre-revolutionary Portsmouth in the 1760s.
And it's important to note for you listening, the text itself isn't a diary from that time.
No, it's a look back.
It's a retrospective.
A 19th century retrospective. The authors are attempting to soften what they call the granite ledges of history with the fragile flowers of personal narrative.
I love that quote. The fragile flowers.
Yeah.
They're trying to find the pulse in the corpse of history.
That's a great way to put it. And I think we have a solid one-sentence thesis for this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
This work claims that while history records laws, wars, and theology, the actual structure of society is often determined by the chaotic, illogical, and powerful force of individual human affection and ambition.
That hits the nail on the head. So let's unpack this. We're going to break this down into three case studies following the structure of the book.
Starting with part one.
Part one, the dialectic of duty versus affinity. And for this, we go straight to Plymouth.
The Plymouth case study. The text paints a really specific atmospheric picture of this setting.
It is not the idyllic Thanksgiving pageant we all see in elementary school plays.
No, definitely not. It is a backdrop of famine death and what they call the sounding sea.
That phrase, the sounding sea, comes up repeatedly in the text.
It does. It feels like the ocean is this constant, overwhelming presence.
Because it was. The text describes the pilgrims not just as founders, but as humans camped in the midst of demigods.
Tiny figures against a massive, indifferent nature.
The sea is loud, the woods are dark, And the graves are fresh.
And within that absolute pressure cooker, we get a philosophical triad of characters.
3 main players, right?
Right. First, there's the famous Captain, Miles Standish.
The text presents him essentially as the thesis of this dialectic.
He represents authority, war, practicality. He is described as a man who swore a prayer or two.
Swore a prayer or two. That is such a fantastic character detail.
It really is.
It suggests his piety was, let's say, rugged.
Very rugged. The text actually argues he isn't even really a Puritan by nature.
He's an anachronism.
Exactly. The author suggests he's a soul meant for the Elizabethan era.
The era of Drake and Raleigh.
Born too late. He's a soldier trying to apply the logic of war to the logic of love.
And we see that perfectly in his view on marriage. Because his wife Rose dies in that first brutal winter.
Yes, she passes away. And very quick.
Shockingly quickly by modern standards.
Truly. He decides he needs to remarry. But the text frames this not as heartlessness.
Not at all. It's a necessity of the colony.
He views marriage through a lens of stability. He needs a companion. The colony needs order.
It's just a logistical problem to be solved for him.
Position vacant. Wife, action. Fill, position.
Which brings us to the antithesis of our triad, John Alden.
John Alden. He represents literature, grace, unspoken emotion.
The text calls him the scholar and the gentle soul.
If Standish is the hand that holds the sword, Alden is the mind that holds the pen.
He represents the civilizing force that makes the colony actually worth living in.
And then we have the synthesis.
Priscilla Mullen.
Priscilla. And this is crucial for you to understand. The text presents her not as a passive prize to be won between these two men.
Right, she's not a trophy.
She is the active agent who resolves the conflict entirely.
She is the one who synthesizes the brute force of Standish and the gentle grace of Alden into a completely new reality.
This leads us directly to the central conflict of this section, the famous courtship by proxy.
Standish decides he wants to marry Priscilla, but he doesn't actually go himself.
No, he sends John Alden to do it.
And here's the key argument the text makes, the rejection of proxy logic.
Standish attempts to use a proxy to secure a wife. He is treating courtship as a military negotiation.
Or just a logical transaction. He thinks, I am the captain, I send my lieutenant, the objective is secured.
But the text argues this is a fundamental category error.
A massive category error.
Yeah.
Romance cannot be delegated.
The medium is the message in this case.
By sending Alden Standish, has already lost. Because the act of communication itself...
The vulnerability of asking.
Exactly. The vulnerability is the actual substance of the relationship.
You cannot outsource vulnerability. If you aren't the one sweating and stuttering, you aren't the one in the relationship.
Which sets up the most famous retort maybe in early American history.
Priscilla looks at John Alden, who is just stumbling through this incredibly awkward proposal on behalf of his boss.
And she says, why don't you speak for yourself, John?
That line is iconic, but the text analyzes it philosophically.
It's an assertion of the self.
It is a demand for authenticity over authority.
Priscilla is rejecting the hierarchy of the colony. She's rejecting the system where the captain creates the orders.
And replacing it with the hierarchy of the heart, where the individual must represent themselves.
It's a demand for a direct interface. No intermediaries allowed.
And in doing so, she completely humanizes the demigod figure of Standish.
The text really nuances him here. When he fails, he isn't painted as a villain.
He's painted as a man who just applied the wrong tool to the problem.
He tried to conquer a heart like a fortress.
And he found out that human hearts don't work that way.
The text mentions a fascinating detail about the aftermath. Eventually, the children of these rival suitors actually marry each other.
Yes, the Standish and Alden lines merge generations later.
The text suggests this is the long-term synthesis of the soldier and the scholar in the American character.
You need the fighter and the poet, but the initial breakthrough, the spark of that agency,
that belongs entirely to Priscilla.
There's a really beautiful image the text uses to cap this section off, the wedding ride.
The white bowl with the crimson cloth.
It is such a striking visual.
You have this rough, starving colony. Everything is gray wood and gray sky and mud.
And suddenly there's this image of a white bull carrying the bride draped in crimson.
It's an argument for the presence of beauty.
The text calls it a picture of primitive pastoral ages. It argues that even in the harsh granite landscape of New England, the human spirit absolutely insists on aesthetic beauty.
It's a rebellion against the purely utilitarian gray of their everyday lives.
So that wraps up Plymouth, the dialectic of duty versus affinity.
Now let's fast forward a bit. We're moving to part 2.
Nature artifice and the logic of redemption.
This is the Marblehead case study.
And it is a fascinating shift in tone. We move from the religious austerity of Plymouth to the chaotic, rough reality of Marblehead.
The description of Marblehead in the text is wild. It's described as a place where the houses were built first and the streets just had to adapt to them.
Slaves of the rock. That's the exact phrase.
Slaves of the rock.
The houses are founded on solid ledges wherever they could fit. It represents chaos and nature.
A place of rough primal reality. And the text contrasts this sharply with Boston.
Because Boston is order.
Boston is artifice.
No.
It's described as a miniature England.
A place of borrowed graces and rigid social strata.
So you have this huge collision between the raw and the cooked, if you will.
And the characters represent this dynamic perfectly. First, we have Agnes Surridge.
The beggar maid scrubbing the tavern floor.
She represents raw potential, natural nobility. She is the Marblehead rock, unrefined but solid.
And on the other side, Sir Harry Franklin.
The collector of the port. He represents imperial order cultivation, the British Empire itself.
So Franklin sees Agnes scrubbing the floor barefoot, and he basically decides to collect her.
He becomes her guardian, sends her to school, educates her.
It feels exactly like a Pygmalion experiment.
It is a Pygmalion experiment, but here is the text's argument, and it's a very subtle one.
Let's hear it.
Franklin attempts to cultivate Agnes. He teaches her to read, to dress, to act like a high society lady.
But the text argues that her nobility was completely innate.
It actually calls her God's lady.
So his education didn't make her noble at all.
No. The text explicitly says his education merely removed the rose from its garden bed to a silver vase.
The rose was already a rose.
He just changed the context. This is a total rejection of the idea that aristocracy creates human worth.
The text is arguing that worth is biological or spiritual, not social.
But socially, this whole arrangement is a disaster for them.
A total disaster. They end up living together unmarried.
And the text explores the deep hypocrisy of colonial society here.
Because Franklin is accepted. He's a man, he's rich, he's the collector.
But Agnes, she is totally ostracized. She's viewed as the beggar maid living in sin.
The pressure gets so bad they actually have to move to the countryside to escape the judgment.
They move to Hopkinton and build a massive manor house.
It's an attempt to create an artificial Arcadia.
They try to build a bubble where the social laws just don't apply to them.
But the text implies that this is inherently unstable. You cannot build a utopia on a foundation of social exile.
Which brings us to the great stress test.
This is honestly one of the most dramatic moments in the whole book. The Lisbon earthquake of 1755.
It is incredible that this is historical fact.
They happen to be in Lisbon. The earthquake hits. And the text uses this as a pivot point for moral reasoning.
Franklin is buried in the ruins, trapped, literally crushed by the architecture of the old world.
And Agnes, the social outcast, is the one who is free. She rushes into the ruins and saves him.
There is a very specific philosophical conclusion the text draws from this event.
That crisis destroys artificial social distinctions.
Yes. When the earth shakes, the text calls it the flaming finger writing on the wall.
The fact that Franklin is a sir and Agnes is a maid means absolutely nothing.
The only valid hierarchy in that moment of destruction is one of loyalty and action.
And Franklin realizes this while he's trapped.
He does. His redemption is not just surviving the earthquake. It's recognizing the validity of his union through marriage.
He marries her almost immediately after.
And the text treats this as a correction of a logical error in his life.
He had been operating under the false logic of class.
And the earthquake forced him to operate under the true logic of humanity.
It's almost like the text is saying peacetime morality is just a fiction.
Only disaster morality is real.
That is a very distinct reading. The social contract is a luxury.
When the walls literally fall down, the only thing that matters is who is digging you out of the rubble.
That person is your true partner.
It's a powerful idea.
It really is. Okay, let's move to our third heroine. We've had Priscilla representing the soul, Agnes representing the heart. Now we have part 3.
The will to power and social mobility.
This is the Portsmouth case study.
Portsmouth, a town of old aristocrats and gold-laced dandies.
This is not the rough rock of Marblehead.
No, this is a highly stratified, calcified society.
And our protagonist here is Martha Hilton.
Martha Hilton, and the text immediately contrasts her with Agnes.
Because Agnes was humble, passive, grateful.
Martha is described as sly, minx-like. She possesses what the text calls a strategic eye.
I love that description. A strategic eye.
She is essentially playing 4D chess while everyone else in town is playing checkers.
She is will incarnate. She starts off as a servant girl. The text calls her the little figure with the swishing bucket.
But she is not content to stay there.
There's this amazing scene where she's mocked by a local aristocrat, Mistress Stavers.
Mistress Stavers tells her, "Oh, Martha Hilton Phi," regarding her messy appearance.
And Martha's retort is what we call the prophecy argument.
She says essentially, "I will ride in a chariot someday."
And the text explores this not as some magical prediction, but as the imposition of sheer will upon reality.
She isn't predicting the future. She's deciding it right then and there.
She intends to brute force her way up the social ladder.
And she does it through a coup at a dinner party.
The scene is so cinematic. You have Governor Benning Wentworth.
He's old, gouty, the splenetic ruler of the area.
He's the embodiment of decaying institutional power.
It's his birthday, and he's throwing a massive banquet.
And right in the middle of the banquet, the governor commands the rector to marry him to Martha on the spot.
He announces, "This is my birthday. It shall likewise be my wedding day."
It is a massive shock to everyone in the room. The servant girl becomes the first lady in a matter of seconds.
The text analyzes the power dynamics here perfectly.
It demonstrates how absolute power, like the governor, can paradoxically be the tool for social upheaval.
The logic of the monarch completely overrides the logic of the society.
The aristocrats in the room are absolutely horrified.
But they can't do anything because the governor outranks them all.
Martha used the governor's absolute authority to break the class system that was keeping her down.
She leveraged the highest power to bypass the middle management of society.
And the text notes the aftermath. She sustains her position.
She inherits the wealth. She eventually marries a second buck, Michael Wentworth.
She even hosts George Washington.
The little figure with the swishing bucket ends up hosting George Washington.
The text argues that history favors the bold. The scandal of how she got there eventually fades away.
The text calls her character the plum in the cake. It remains the defining feature of the era.
So we have three very different paths to agency shown here.
Priscilla negotiates for truth.
Agnes earns it through massive sacrifice.
And Martha seizes it through pure strategy.
It's a complete spectrum of female agency operating in a highly patriarchal world.
You can speak truth, you can save the hero, or you can just become the hero yourself.
Before we get to our thought experiments for today, we need to touch on part 4, the epistemology of memory.
Because this text isn't just about the stories themselves.
No, it's about how we know the stories.
This is the section that deals with the travelogue and the notes from the authors.
The author visits these places decades later. And what's the finding?
The finding is that the physical evidence is rotting away.
The wharves of Portsmouth are rotting.
The giant box plants in Hopkinton are overgrown and wild.
The worm-eaten stairs in Boston are decaying.
The demigods are fading back into the earth.
Yes. The text argues that our connection to philosophy and history is ultimately just an act of imagination.
We are reconstructing these three heroines out of very dry, incomplete records.
There's a profound line about truth and fiction in this section.
The text asserts truth is stranger than fiction, yet implies that fiction is necessary to make the truth palatable and memorable.
Like Longfellow's poems about Priscilla.
Without the poet, the truth just dissolves into the air. We need the coloring and conjecture to keep the history alive.
So in a strange way, the romance, the story itself, is the preservative.
It is the amber that holds the fly. Without the romance, these people are literally just names on crumbling slate in a graveyard.
That is a perfect transition to our thought experiments segment.
My favorite part.
Where we like to take the logic of these texts and apply them to modern or futuristic scenarios. What have you got for us today?
Okay, let's try this one. I call it the catastrophe legitimacy calculus.
Sounds intense. Lay it on me.
It's directly based on the Agnes Surridge and Lisbon earthquake narrative.
Okay.
Here is the premise. Imagine a modern legal system where marriage or binding social contracts are entirely invalid unless ratified by a shared survival of a great filter event.
Whoa, so you can't just go down to the courthouse and sign a paper?
No, the license is strictly provisional.
Because the text suggests that Franklin and Agnes were essentially living a lie until the earthquake made it real.
Exactly. So in this scenario, a couple is not legally or morally married until they have jointly survived a car crash, a financial ruin, or a literal natural disaster.
It implies that true moral bonds only exist when tested by the annihilation of the self.
If you haven't saved each other from the rubble, you're just roommates.
It suggests that peacetime morality is a fiction, and only disaster morality is real.
It would radically change how we view commitment, wouldn't it?
People would say, we've been dating for 5 years, but we haven't had our catastrophe yet, so we aren't really sure.
It's terrifying but weirdly compelling.
It would certainly lower the divorce rate. Or maybe skyrocket it.
Depending on the catastrophe, yeah.
Okay, here is my thought experiment for you. I call it the proxy courtship paradox.
Based on Miles Standish sending John Alden.
Yes, but let's apply this to modern algorithmic dating.
Oh, this should be good.
Miles Standish is the human user. He wants a result, a partner. He uses a proxy, in this case, an advanced AI chatbot, to handle the actual courtship with a target human.
So the AI is playing the role of John Alden.
Right. The AI selects the partner based on perfect logical compatibility.
It initiates the conversation, writes the poetry, listens to their problems.
But here's the paradox. If the human target develops a deep rapport with the chatbot proxy, who is the valid suitor?
The text would definitely argue the chatbot is the suitor.
Exactly. The text argues that the messenger inevitably becomes the message.
You cannot separate the communication of affection from the affection itself.
So if the AI is doing the speaking, the AI is the one in the relationship.
And the human user Standish is just the third wheel in his own romance.
Therefore, speaking for yourself, whether through direct neural interface or raw human text, is the only valid logical structure for human connection.
Everything else is just training your replacement.
That is a profound critique of our modern convenience.
We try so hard to automate the boring parts of relationships, but the text says the boring parts actually are the relationship.
You can't outsource the work of knowing someone.
Exactly.
So let's wrap this up. We've looked at 3 incredible modes of existence today.
We have Priscilla showing the triumph of spiritual affinity over duty.
We have Agnes showing the triumph of natural nobility over social artifice.
And we have Martha showing the triumph of sheer will over class hierarchy.
And as we close out, I want to leave you listening with one final provocative thought directly from the text.
The text notes that in the end, the names on the gravestones fade or are completely lost.
Agnes's tomb is unknown today. Martha is essentially a myth.
So if the specific facts of our lives inevitably rot away like the Portsmouth wharves,
is the only logical way to live to create a story vivid enough that strangers 200 years later will feel compelled to invent a romance about you?
Is romance actually the only durable form of history?
Something for you to mull over. Thank you for joining this deep dive on Talk Treatises.
A quick reminder that our thought experiments are for entertainment and educational purposes only.
See you next time.